This woman tried to sell her baby for $500. This case is absolutely shocking. Jessica Woods is a 33-year-old mother from Florida. Jessica was recently hanging around shops in her local area of Paltzka with her 18-month-old daughter. It's reported that one of the employees nearby asked Jessica if she needed any help. Now, shockingly, Jessica stated that no, she didn't need any help, but she would be willing to sell her daughter to the shop assistant. She stated that she wanted to sell her child for $500. Now, the employee obviously declined to buy a child off this woman, and Jessica then shockingly walked off and left her with the daughter. Obviously, the member of staff kept the child really safe and took her to a nearby police station. She told the police the horrific situation that had unfolded, and police obviously went then and arrested Jessica. Her poor child has been placed in foster care. Jessica was charged with child abuse, child neglect, and abandonment of a child.
Whatever you do, never go searching for this video. These 5 friends were forced to kill each other by the Mexican cartel. These 5 young, aged from 19 to 22, were looking for some sort of employment, and they were promised a high-paying job at a call center. But when the alleged contact was taking them to meet the people for the job, it actually turned out to be a whole scheme to recruit them to the Mexican cartel. And when all 5 of these boys said they didn't want to join, the cartel then said okay and tied them up, taped their mouth and took a picture, and then recorded one of the friends killing all the other 4 friends. And after that, they put the 5th one, who just killed all of his friends, into a car and set it on fire. I am telling you right now, do not go searching for this video because you will find it. And trust me, you do not want to see something like this. This case is absolutely horrific, and the fact that this happens way more often than we think is just extremely scary and disturbing. It's just sad that these young men were just trying to get a job and make some money for themselves. But instead, it turned into a living nightmare. Rest in peace, these 5 young men.
This teacher was just sentenced for diddling with a student on a field trip that she was chaperoning on. This is Heather Hare. This happened in Arkansas. She will now spend a decade in prison after engaging and diddling with this minor 20 to 30 times. The exact number of years is 13 years, which she'll be spending behind bars. Now, on top of that, she has lifetime supervision. She's never not going to be under the radar. She was a science teacher at Bryant High School. She met the minor when he was a senior. She then slipped him the number. They started hitting each other up on Instagram and Snapchat, and you know the rest. And they even did it inside of the classroom and in the teacher parking lot. You might be asking, how did they figure out they were doing it with each other? I was questioning how this happened, but you know, teenage boys will talk a lot and they'll spread all over the school, stuff like that. That's just my guess. I can't find the actual reason in any articles I've read. Maybe the FBI tapped her phone, because the FBI, they were involved in this. But damn, that is just crazy. I believe she was caught while on a DC field trip. That was referencing the chaperoning of the field trip earlier. He was also the only male student there. Maybe one of the other students noticed a weird relationship going on and reported it. But yeah, she's getting locked up. Let me know what you guys think about the story in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
These are things that humans should never hear. Okay, so have you heard of the Apollo 1 disaster? If not, the Apollo 1 was the first crewed mission of the Apollo program, and they were trying to be the first man on the moon. But on January 27, 1967, a fire swept through the Apollo 1 command module during a launch rehearsal test, tragically killing all 3 astronauts trapped inside. Gus Grissom is on the left, Ed White is in the middle, and Roger Schaeff is on the right. The video I'm about to show you is the audio from inside Apollo 1 while the fire is happening and all 3 of them are burning alive. The sounds of their screams is honestly sickening, and here it is.
In 2013, 78-year-old former mall Santa Lawrence Doris was arrested. This isn't a picture of Lawrence, but I couldn't find one online, so I had to get a reference. And Lawrence was arrested for being a pedophile. Apparently, in the year between 2012 and 2013, Lawrence abused 5 different children. Yes, Lawrence was facing 6 sexual assault charges against kids. And one of those claims was actually related to a child who reported they had been touched inappropriately while on Santa's lap. Now, the police went on to claim that his pedophile activities had nothing to do with his time spent working as a mall Santa, which I definitely find hard to believe. But this is crazy. Lawrence was eventually sentenced to only 30 months in prison. 30 months for assaulting 5 children. Mall Santas are pretty creepy in general, but I would imagine that career choice would draw a certain type of individual, aka a pedophile who gets free access to hundreds of children, who, yes, then come and sit on his lap. Ugh. But Lawrence wasn't even the worst mall Santa, and I'm going to talk about the next one in another video. And if you like true crime stories like this, listen to our podcast Murder in America, available on all streaming platforms.
The most disturbing things that happen in a soccer match. Obviously, we both know how wild soccer matches get, especially if it's rival teams.
Definitely.
So in 2013 in Brazil, there was a soccer match going on. I would explain it more as like a Sunday league match, pickup game of soccer. And there was a guy, his name was Octavio Jordo da Silva Catanigi. He was Brazilian. He was 19 years old. He went out to go play in this match. So everything was just normal until he ended up getting injured in the game, which relegated him to being a referee. And then there was one point where the ref gives one of the players a yellow card. Obviously, he got mad. They ended up getting into an argument, which ended up leading to the ref giving the player a red card. He's sending him off the game. That triggered him even more, which ended up making him punch the ref, falling down to the floor. But then when he got back up, he pulled out a knife, stabbed the player multiple times on the field in front of everybody.
The fuck?
So all the players, whenever they saw this, they obviously stormed the ref. They tied him down, and while the ref was tied up, they were just waiting for an update on the guy. But unfortunately, the guy ended up dying on the way to the hospital.
Fuck, bro.
They ended up stoning the ref, but it doesn't stop there. The people ripped the limbs off his body just with their pure strength.
What the
No
fuck?
weapons used. Decapitating his head, put his head on the stake. And also, a disturbing thing that happened was, I think shortly after this incident, videos and...
Video?
Yes, there was a video and pictures of the medical workers.
After a man went missing in Pennsylvania, what police discovered was traumatizing. David Hittinger was a 37-year-old man living in Pennsylvania. His friend contacted police earlier this month after becoming concerned for his welfare. He was reported missing after having not been seen in an unusual amount of time. It had apparently been his birthday, so it was incredibly strange that he hadn't contacted his friends at all. A search began to try and find David on the 13th of May. He was apparently last seen 2 days prior to this. Police began searching in locations that they knew that David may have been. This included the new home that he'd just moved into. He'd recently moved in with a 33-year-old named Joshua Moser. What police found at the property was incredibly concerning. They found forensic evidence including hair and a large amount of blood. Horrifyingly, they also found a box cutter and a saw. There was also bloody clothing in the house. They then widened the search to the local area and tragically found several body parts in bin bags in different locations. Some were in the cemetery and some were in a quarry in Washington Township. It's reported that Joshua allegedly admitted to killing his roommate by strangulation. He's also alleged to have admitted hitting him in the head with a hammer. A motive is currently unknown. Joshua has been charged with criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence.
These are videos you need to see before you die.
Imagine your loved one going missing for 26 years, only to find out that they'd been held captive just feet away from you the whole time. In 1998, a man from Algeria, Omar bin Omran, vanished. Now, this was during the Algerian Civil War, and heartbreakingly, some family members started to come to terms with the fact that he may have passed away as a war casualty. Although this was the opinion of some family members, Omar's mum had an instinct. She felt he was alive, and she told people that she felt like he was nearby. Tragically, she passed away in 2013, never seeing her son again. Now, during the time that Omar was missing, his dog became unusually interested in one of the houses close by. He would linger around one particular house, and one day, trigger warning here for animals, horrifically he was found dead. It was determined that the dog had been poisoned. Almost 30 years went by with no sign of Omar. That was until recently, when a social media post made a shocking claim. The post alleged that someone was holding Omar captive close to his family's home. Police were led to the house in question and made a shocking discovery on the 12th of May. It's alleged that there in northern Algeria, in his neighbour's home, Omar was found. He'd reportedly been held captive for 26 years in a haystack. It was believed to have only been around 650 feet away from his family home. He was understandably extremely distressed when he was found. Police have arrested a 61-year-old man on suspicion of his kidnap.
This woman claimed that her 18-month-old daughter would become the next Jeffrey Dahmer and killed her because of it. I don't think that I've ever been more angry reading a true crime case. This is Cheyenne Hill. Police were called to Riley Children's Hospital in Indiana on November 23, 2022, after Cheyenne's daughter, 18-month-old Eliana, was admitted with horrific injuries. Eliana was severely malnourished and had a brain bleed, a broken collarbone, bruises on her face, and a swollen and deformed head. After seeing just how bad her injuries were, someone in Child Services notified authorities about Eliana's condition, which sparked an investigation into Cheyenne. While she was still hospitalized, Cheyenne told police that Eliana would become the next Jeffrey Dahmer, a serial killer who killed at least 17 men and boys starting in 1978. She went on to say that she believed her daughter was not a nice kid and that something wasn't right with her. When police asked her why she compared her 18-month-old to Jeffrey Dahmer, she laughed, and as Eliana lay there dying, Cheyenne called her an asshole. Sadly, just a few days later, little Eliana would die because of her injuries. Her death was ruled a homicide as a result of blunt force trauma to the head. Early on in the investigation, it came to light that a couple of witnesses noticed bruises and swelling on Eliana's face in the days leading up to her ultimate death. And on one occasion, a witness even told Cheyenne that she needed to be taken to the doctor. But Cheyenne snapped back at them and said, quote, "No. Under no circumstances are you to call an ambulance or take her to the hospital. I will make the decisions. That is my child." End quote. Cheyenne would eventually take her into the hospital, but not for another 8 days. Authorities also found that Cheyenne reportedly told a neighbor that Eliana was going to kill someone one day, and she also blamed Eliana as being the reason why her boyfriend wouldn't marry her. Even with all of this evidence, it would take nearly a year for Cheyenne to be arrested in connection to her daughter's death. During the trial, prosecutors couldn't prove that Cheyenne was the one who inflicted the injuries, but they were able to prove that Cheyenne neglected Eliana after the abuse. Cheyenne reportedly left Eliana in critical condition after the abuse and went to work, which is what ultimately led to her death. On Tuesday, Cheyenne was convicted of child neglect causing death and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. She showed no emotion or remorse in court. It's stories like this that anger me so much and make me realize that not everyone should be allowed to have kids.
These are disturbing war crimes caught on camera explained, and this is a massive trigger warning. The video that I'm about to explain is pretty disturbing and lasting quite long, coming in at 6 minutes in length. The video isn't an easy watch at all, and some people even believe the video is not real whatsoever. But that hasn't been confirmed or denied. The video appears to be edited together, some clips are clear and others are blurry. Also, the victim doesn't struggle at all, which is very surprising, especially once you hear about the situation he is in. And besides coughing a couple times, the victim doesn't make any noise at all, even though he is fully conscious. As you play the video, it takes place in a rural location and you see two men in military gear holding two shovels, standing next to a deep, freshly dug grave. Then you see another two men enter shot, also in military gear, and they are bringing the victim to the grave. Once they get close to the grave, they push the victim into the grave, and the victim's hands are tied behind his back and he has a bag over his head. After the victim falls into the grave, it's hard to make out, but it's possible the two men holding the shovels next to the grave strike the victim with them. The person filming then gets closer to the scene and you see the victim lying face first into the grave. He coughs and makes a couple of sounds, but surprisingly doesn't scream once. Two of the men then quickly start shoveling dirt into the grave, while another hops into the grave to duct tape the man's feet together. As the men continue to shovel dirt into the grave, one of them says he's not dead yet. And for the next 6 minutes, the men continue to shovel dirt into the grave until it's completely full. Once the grave has been filled in, a man then stomps the dirt flat before taking a rusty old shovel which he sticks into the ground upside down, and he's using this rusty shovel as a makeshift gravestone. He then writes something on the shovel which isn't clear enough to translate, but I would assume it's some sort of insult to the victim or a warning sign to their enemies. Whether the video is real or not is still up for debate, but what's for sure is the video is still extremely awful and disturbing. There's not many worse ways to die than being buried alive. The victim was literally feeling the weight of the earth on him until he suffocated to death. I don't recommend searching for this or watching the video. It's truly just awful.
I'm dying because I can't breathe. I'm sorry, Mum. This is part of the final text from one of the victims of the horrific Essex lorry deaths. It was the 23rd of October 2019 in Essex. Just after 1:40, lorry driver Maurice Robinson rang 999. Ambulance and police arrived to an absolutely horrific scene. There were 39 bodies discovered in the back of a refrigerated lorry. Tragically, the ambulance was not able to resuscitate any of them. Fatalities included 31 males and 8 females. There were 10 teenagers. The youngest victims were just 15 years old. Now, police arrested the lorry driver, who was 25-year-old Maurice Robinson. Maurice was from Northern Ireland, and police needed to get to the bottom of what on earth had gone on. Postmortems of the victims stated that they had passed away from a mixture of hypoxia and hypothermia. A huge investigation was underway, and in November, some information was released. One of the teenage victims had gone missing from an asylum centre in the Netherlands. Now, the victims were initially said to have been potentially victims of human trafficking, or may have paid someone to smuggle them illegally into the country. The family of one of the victims came forward to share a heartbreaking final text. The woman was 26 years old and sent a heartbreaking message stating, "I'm dying because I can't breathe," and then, "I am sorry, Mum." Her family revealed that they had actually paid smugglers around £30,000 to smuggle her into the UK. It wasn't until the 7th of November that all of the victims were formally identified. Now, the murder investigation was absolutely huge, as I said. Grisly details were revealed, and it was discovered that the lorry went from the Netherlands and the victims were trapped inside a refrigerated lorry for around 10 hours. They were said to have died excruciatingly painful deaths. They actually basically gradually suffocated in this trailer. Now, the motive for this crime and the criminal operation that went on was said to have obviously been financial. 2 men that played leading roles in the smuggling were jailed for 20 and 27 years. Maurice Robinson was given 13 years and 4 months. 3 other members of the people smuggling gang were also sentenced for conspiracy to facilitate unlawful immigration.
Let me tell you guys about a time that a man flooded the Mississippi River so he could party more and stall his wife from coming home. He apparently went on, damaged one of the levees, and then that flooded everything. Levees are embankments that prevent bodies of water from overflowing, specifically rivers in this case. And he literally only did all of this so he could go fishing with his friends and party a little more before she got home, because she was on the other side of that bridge. Now, his actions flooded 14,000 acres of farmland, destroyed buildings, and caused just devastating damage to infrastructure overall. Now, this is not his first crime either. In 1982, he decided to burn down his elementary school for some reason. He also got more arson charges as the years went on. This guy just loved fire, I guess. He is currently still serving a life sentence in prison for flooding the Mississippi River. However, many argue he didn't cause this. It just kind of added up that way. People are claiming there were many factors before this levee got damaged. Was he the feather that broke the camel's back? Let me know what you guys think about James Scott and him flooding the Mississippi River in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
We all know the movie Paranormal Activity, right? Well, this couple literally experienced it in real life. On August 6, 2022, a security camera in this couple's hallway captured this. And this is well after midnight when it happened. Just watch. And as you can see, nobody was at the door when he opened it. But what makes this even scarier is what happened the next day.
They do want you there. They want you there. They like you a lot. No, they don't. They like me. They're my friends. But but they like you a lot.
They're acting rude to me.
They're not trying. That's just how they.
It seems like whatever entity or spirit this was wanted to break up this argument. Let me know if you guys are interested in a part 2 because this couple has an insane amount of paranormal activity happening to them.
This guy is one of the most awful serial killers there has ever been, and I feel like he's never talked about. In my opinion, this guy's worse than Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer. Hi Meg, I talk about true crime. Let's get into the story of the Butcher, the worst serial killer Canada has ever seen. Robert Pickton was born October 24th, 1949, in British Columbia, Canada. Robert had quite a bad upbringing. His dad was very abusive. He actually grew up on a pig farm. From a really young age, him and his brother had to work countless hours on this pig farm, and then they were forced to go straight to school without taking a shower or anything. Because he was showing up to school unwashed, Robert started getting bullied, and they gave him the nickname Stinky Piggy. As Robert grew older, he was said to be very quiet, but he apparently sometimes had these weird bursts of bizarre behavior. These bursts would come out of nowhere, and he would just start acting really strange. In 1996, Robert's brother opened up a kind of charity thing. The charity was started to try to make more money for their pig farm. It was called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. And what they would do is they would hold huge parties and raves to try and raise money. And I'm not joking when I say huge parties and raves. 17,000 people were said to have shown up at one point. 17,000 people at once. Sex workers and biker gangs would join these parties as well. But for Robert, it all started going downhill in 1997 when he attempted to murder a girl. I don't usually do this in these videos, but a lot of you ask what blush I use, and this is the blush I use. It's usually £10 on the TikTok shop, but it's on for $5 right now. So if you click right here, you can get it. I just ordered kind of a peachy version of this. I'm not being paid to talk about this. I just saw they were on offer, and you guys ask about these all the time. So get your hands on them for cheap while you can. So Robert attempts to murder a woman for the first time that we know of. According to her statement, he attempted to handcuff her, and then he started stabbing her multiple times before she managed to get away. This should have been the thing that got him on police radar, but he was able to get the charges dropped because the woman he attacked was on a lot of drugs at the time, and Robert used that to come up with a story. He told police, like, she was hitchhiking, I was just trying to help her, and she attacked me. And they believed him because she was on drugs. And unfortunately, for the next 60 women he would kill, he was let go. And he was able to come up with a strategy that wouldn't get him caught next time. He developed a plan and started killing a bunch of women. And Robert was really, really good at staying under the radar. Now, what did he do exactly? Let me tell you. Because it's disturbing. First of all, he always went for hitchhikers, addicts, or prostitutes. And what he would do is he would promise them money, drugs, accommodation, anything to get them back to his farm. Once he got them back, he would then shoot or strangle them to death. And this next part is why he was given the name the Butcher. He would take the victims' bodies, chop them up, and feed them to his pigs. Now, if you're not aware of this already, pigs will literally eat anything, everything. So the evidence was just, bye. They were getting rid of the evidence for him. All of a sudden, there is an increase in missing women in the area. But sadly, because he only went after sex workers or addicts or hitchhikers, no one cared. And this always makes me so mad with cases like these. Like, they're still human beings, but no bodies were showing up, so there was no crime, no body, no crime. But as the numbers started rising, people were kind of getting a bit worried. A group of people that weren't the police actually got a list together of all of the names of these young women who were missing. They brought that to the police and were like, "Do you see now?" And that's when the investigation actually began into finding out what happened to these girls. And all of these girls had one person in common: Robert Pickton. He was the only person whose name continuously came up when they were looking for these girls. Police needed a way to get onto the farm with a warrant without him knowing about it and hiding all the evidence first. And so they heard that he had possession of an illegal firearm. And so they used that as the cover-up to get onto his property. On the property, they found multiple items that belonged to these missing women, along with some blood-stained clothing and tiny bone fragments. Now, things aren't looking too good for Robert, but because the pigs had eaten all the evidence, basically all of it, they were only able to charge him with the murder of 6 women. And so he got 6 counts of murder. When he got arrested, he actually said that he killed 49 women and that he was sad that he didn't get to round up to 50. What the hell, Robert? What does he want the police officer to say, like, "Oh, I feel so bad for you"? No! He was arrested in 2002, and this trial was huge. Of course, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. But guys, that's not the worst part of this story, because I'm getting to that now. One element of the story that I kept out until now is that Robert sold the meat of his pigs to people who lived around the area. These pigs, who ate the remains of 60 women, were sold to his neighbors. When I say neighbors, I just mean people who live in the area. So, like, secondhand cannibalism. I could never eat pig again if that was me. So yeah, they were pretty disturbed and freaked out by this information, which is totally understandable and just totally disgusting. After a huge search of his property, police now believe that the number of women Robert killed was in the 60s. 60 women. 60 mother, daughters, wives. It's insane. It really annoys me with cases like these. I know it was like in 2002 and things have changed, but have they? I find that a lot of cases like these that I cover always start with, "Oh, all these women were going missing, but they were sex workers, but they were drug addicts, who cares?" And it's like, it's insane to me that like they're not seen as equals to any other woman walking on the street, but whatever. Hopefully that changes. And for those wondering, I have actually covered this story before, but the quality of the video was so bad that I couldn't keep it up anymore. Like, it really bothered me to watch back, so I thought I would remake it in a higher quality way. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless, and have a wonderful day. My heart goes out to every single one of the victims, their families, and people who cared about them, and I hope Robert rots in jail. Anyways, this is not a good representation of Canadians. We're actually really nice people. I'll see you all in the next video. Love you guys. Bye.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know about the Columbine High School shooting. It was the first school shooting and it's the most famous one. But have you ever wondered what the school looks like 20 years later? Well, if so, I'm about to show you a video of Columbine High School, current day, and it's absolutely unsettling knowing what happened there 20 years earlier.
I believe Eric parked somewhere here, and Dylan parked on the opposite side of the building. And let's walk this way. You can see inside. Oh yeah. Nice. Library was right up here. They tore it down though. they went up these stairs, but they rebuilt all of this. All of this shit was not here when it happened, but there was still a set of stairs that came up here. Came up here, shot Rachel Scott and that other guy, Richard Casaldo, I think his name is. I think they're sitting over here somewhere. Nope. So yeah, so I think they did that shit by the cafeteria, came up here, and entered the school through this way, and then went to the library from the second floor. I think, I don't know. This is new. This wasn't here. This is a new library. Beautiful view.
We hear a lot about what Jeffrey Epstein has done, but who was he? Let's take a look at his past. Jeffrey Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York. He came from a working class family. His father worked for the New York City Parks and Recreation Department, and his mom was a stay-at-home mom. And everybody who knew Jeffrey Epstein when he was younger only has good things to say about him. They said he was a sweet guy, he was quiet and nerdy, and he even was given the nickname Epi as a child. Jeffrey also started playing the piano at the age of 5, and he was regarded as being a very talented musician. He eventually graduated high school in 1969 and then went on to university, but he never finished his degree. Now this is where it gets interesting. So in the year 1974, Jeffrey Epstein starts teaching physics and mathematics at a local school. The headmaster of the school was known for hiring random people, and it's unclear how Jeffrey Epstein got hired, but he wasn't qualified to be teaching there. And according to former students who had him as a teacher, he paid extremely close attention to the young female students. Obviously, all these girls were minors at the time that he was teaching, since this was high school, but he was also known to show up at parties where minors were drinking and hang out with them. But eventually, through his teaching job, Jeffrey Epstein was introduced to this man, Alan Greenberg. Alan Greenberg was the CEO of the investment bank Bear Stearns, and his son and daughter attended the school that Jeffrey Epstein was teaching at. And eventually, once it was found out that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't qualified for the job and his performance was poor, he was fired, and he then was recruited by Alan to join Bear Stearns. Now, this is where Jeffrey Epstein moves into the financial world and starts making a lot of money. He eventually worked his way up the ladder at Bear Stearns, but was eventually let go because of a violation with his work. He then founded his own investment company, and this is where things get really strange. Jeffrey told friends at the time that he oftentimes worked for governments to help them recover embezzled funds, and he would also work for people who had embezzled funds. He also told some of his friends at the time that he worked as an intelligence agent. One fact that could point out that this might have been true is that Jeffrey Epstein had possession of an Australian passport with his photo on it but a different name. His place of residence was also listed as being Saudi Arabia. This relates back to one of the later cases in Jeffrey Epstein's life when a U.S. district attorney stated that they were initially told to leave Jeffrey Epstein's case alone because he was considered to be a part of intelligence. There are a lot of connections that do point to Jeffrey Epstein possibly being some sort of intelligence agent, but if you want me to cover some of those, I can make a whole different TikTok. Eventually, though, Jeffrey Epstein was this rich bachelor living in New York City. You can even look at one of these ads that was taking out about Jeffrey Epstein looking for a woman. This is a very eerie ad considering what he went on to do with his life. And if you want me to talk more about Jeffrey Epstein's life, let me know in the comments below. Make a part 2.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
Shocking true crime footage genuinely gave me nightmares for weeks. This is the disturbing case of the collar bomb delivery man. It was the rural small town of Erie in Pennsylvania. In August 2003, an order came into a pizzeria for 2 small pizzas. Now, the delivery location was only a few kilometers away from the pizzeria. Now, for that reason, although Brian Wells, pictured here, was about to finish his shift, he decided to do the final drop of the day. No one could have ever guessed the horrors that were about to unfold. He drove to the delivery location with the pizza in his car. As he got out of the car, terrifyingly, he was confronted with a bomb and forced to put it round his neck. He was given a weapon and 2 pages of instructions and was told to go and rob a bank. Now, he was quite a sight when he arrived at the bank because he had this huge bomb round his neck. He went over to the clerk and passed her a note demanding $250,000. The note stated if he didn't receive that money, the bomb would explode. Now, the woman didn't have access to that amount of money, so she actually just gave him what she had at the time. This was only around $8,000. Brian left the bank, and at this point, police started to follow him. They tracked him down to a nearby car park. Now, police managed to handcuff him, but he actually still had the device round his neck. They had no idea whether this was genuine or a complete hoax. Dramatic scenes were broadcast live on TV. Now, in really distressing scenes that you can actually still access, Brian was begging police for help at this point and explaining that it was a real bomb. Everyone stood back and basically just watched this unfold, unsure of what to do. Around 8 minutes later, in front of stunned onlookers, the device exploded. Brian was obviously killed instantly. When I watched this scene on Evil Genius, which is a Netflix documentary about this case, I was absolutely stunned that they actually showed this. So police eventually go over to the car that Brian had been in and find a list of instructions that Brian had been given. There were tasks on there that were still to be completed, so the police decided to do the tasks themselves to see who was responsible for this weird scavenger hunt. The trail actually took them back to the original delivery location to a jar in the woods, which was actually empty. Now, it's controversial as to whether Brian was in on this plot or not, and whether he knew certain information and didn't know other bits. Some witnesses say that he talked about a bank robbery months before. Some people believe that he may have just not realised it would be a real device round his neck. Now, Marjorie Deal Armstrong was convicted of this crime and sentenced to life in prison. It's not really understood what Brian's connection directly to Marjorie was. A man named Kenneth Barnes was also involved and gave police evidence against Marjorie. Some believe that a man named William Rothstein was the mastermind behind the whole thing. Now, he actually passed away before he could undergo a trial. It's widely believed that he was the one that actually made the bomb. Brian was actually seen leaving William's house the day before this. It's believed that the motive for this crime was money and that Brian Wells knew the others through substance dealing.
The crime scene photographs of Jeffrey Epstein's prison cell after he took his own life paint a very different image than the official story seems to. So a lot of this information is taken from a great 60 Minutes report. This is the noose that Jeffrey Epstein allegedly used when he took his own life. When 60 Minutes conducted their report and wrote their story, sources told them that Jeffrey was cut down from where he was found by a prison guard. And if that's the case, a lot of people have pointed out that there's no real tearing. It doesn't look like anybody ever took a pair of scissors to this noose right here. It's just one of those small inconsistencies in the story that people question. There were a lot of different things found in his jail cell, but a lot of different people, crime scene technicians, even celebrities have questioned how a man who was almost 6 feet tall and 180 pounds could take his own life hanging from here to the floor. A lot of people have also noticed how these pill bottles and other boxes and things are sitting upright on top of the bunk. The same bunk that Epstein tied some fabric to and used to take his own life. So they've questioned why all of the bottles are in perfect upright position. Like I said before, you're free to think whatever you want to about this whole thing, but I'm just laying out some of the things that people cite as evidence that the official story might not be what actually happened. So this is Michael Baden. He's a forensic pathologist, and he's one of the people that kind of fundamentally changes this story. So he independently took a look at Epstein's body after the official autopsy report, and he noticed some inconsistencies. He said that the noose that was included in the autopsy report didn't match the item that would have been used on Epstein's neck based on his wounds. He also said that the ligature mark was in the center of Epstein's neck and not directly underneath the jawbone, as one would expect most of the time with a hanging like this. He's a pretty controversial figure, but he testified at other famous trials like the trial of O.J. Simpson and murderer Phil Spector, so the guy's overseen a lot of different autopsies. Another interesting thing about all of this is that there are no photos of Epstein's body inside of his prison cell. There's not a single picture. Various attorneys, pathologists, officials have gone on the record and said that they should have taken photos of the body because he had assumedly been dead for around 2 hours before he was discovered. So instead of trying to save him, they should have treated this whole ordeal like the prison cell was a crime scene. So I'm going to read this to you. This is a pretty interesting side note here. Among the injuries found on Epstein during the autopsy are contusions on both wrists, an abrasion on his left forearm, and deep muscle hemorrhaging in his left shoulder muscle. Photos also show an injury to the back of his neck, a cut on his lip, and an injection mark in his arm, though it is unknown whether the latter injuries occurred during an attempt to resuscitate Epstein at a hospital. Those are all just little minor injuries that have never been fully explained. But the injuries to Epstein's neck were the key things that Michael Baden emphasized. He discovered fractures on the left and right thyroid cartilage and the left hyoid bone. He went on the record and stated he's never seen 3 fractures like that in a suicide. He also stated that small capillaries that had burst on Epstein's face, mouth, and eyes were oftentimes the indication of strangulation as opposed to hanging. Follow for part 4.
This is the man who inspired the horror movie Scream. Danny Rolling is a serial killer who terrorized college students in Gainesville, Florida in 1990. He later got the name the Gainesville Ripper after murdering 5 college students over a 4-day killing spree. Growing up, Danny was severely abused, which bled into his adulthood. He started off committing petty crimes and robberies, and without getting into his backstory too much, he would later turn to murder. He would mutilate his victims' bodies and then pose them, sometimes using mirrors. On August 24, 1990, Danny broke into an apartment shared by 17-year-old Sonia Larson and Christina Powell, both freshmen at the University of Florida. After breaking in, he went upstairs and found Sonia sleeping, where he then taped her mouth shut, tied her up, and then stabbed her to death using a K-bar knife. She sadly died while trying to fend him off. Danny then went downstairs and found Christina sleeping on the couch, where he also restrained her and sexually assaulted her. He would then stab her 5 times in the back, killing her. Before leaving their apartment, he posed both of their bodies in a sexual position and then took a shower. Not even 24 hours later, Danny broke into 18-year-old Krista Hoyt's apartment via her sliding glass door. She was also a student at the University of Florida. At this point, Krista was not home, so he waited for her. When she finally arrived home at around 11 a.m., Danny attacked her from behind, tied her up, and sexually assaulted her as well. He then forced her to lay face down and stabbed her in the back, which ruptured her aorta. Danny proceeded to mutilate her body, cutting her open from her pubic bone to her breastbone before leaving. But shortly after he left, he realized that he couldn't find his wallet, and fearing that he left it at the crime scene, he returned to look for it. It was then that he decided to decapitate Krista, posing her body in a sitting position on the edge of her bed. He then placed her head on a shelf facing her body. At this point, news of the murder spread and fear grew throughout the campus. Many students either left or roomed up with each other for safety. 2 days later, Danny would break into an apartment shared by 23-year-old Tracy Pauls and Manny Tabata via their sliding glass door. Tracy was also a student at the University of Florida, while Manny was a student at Santa Fe. Danny killed Manny first, who was sleeping in his bed, and it was so loud that Tracy heard and tried to barricade herself in her room. But unfortunately, Danny found a way in, tied her up, and sexually assaulted her. He stabbed her 3 times in the back, which killed her. He then posed her body as well. As major as these murders were, authorities really didn't have any leads. But a twist in this case would come when the Florida police were contacted by authorities in Louisiana who notified them of an unsolved triple murder in Shreveport that took place in 1989. They noted multiple similarities, such as a family being stabbed to death in their home and one of the victims being mutilated and posed in a similar manner. Authorities were able to collect some DNA left behind at both crime scenes and determine that the person responsible for each crime both had type B blood. And it was then that these cases became connected. Shortly after this connection, a tip through Crime Stoppers came in where a woman mentioned Danny Rolling's name and said that the police needed to investigate him. She reportedly knew Danny and said that he was a really creepy man that she felt was possibly connected. And so when authorities tracked Danny down, they found that he was actually already in jail on an unrelated robbery charge that took place 10 days after the college murders. Danny also had type B blood, and looking further into him, police found his tools that matched wounds in the murders. He had also been camping out in a wooded area near the college apartments and had recorded himself talking about the murders. Danny was charged with 5 counts of murder and stated that he wanted to be a superstar like Ted Bundy. He was sentenced to death, and shortly before he confessed to the Shreveport murders. Danny was executed by lethal injection on October 25, 2006. This case inspired the 1996 horror movie Scream.
There has been an absolutely horrific murder this week that was live streamed on Instagram. This case is extremely disturbing, so please be warned before watching. On Friday, 12,000 people watched a Bosnian bodybuilder kill his wife on Instagram Live. 35-year-old Nermin had been abusing his wife during their marriage, and the pair had a young child. On Friday morning, he took to Instagram Live to tell his followers that they could witness a live killing. Absolutely horrifically, he turns the camera to his ex, whose face is completely covered in blood and disfigured. He calls her a derogatory name and blames her for her own death because she reported him to police. Disturbingly, you can hear the child crying in the background. He then tells his followers that he's the child's father and his ex had hidden the toddler from him for over a week and reported him to police for DV. So, in my opinion, yes, she's taking steps to keep her and her child safe from you. After shooting his wife in the head on Instagram, he then goads his followers saying, "Someone come and save the child." A police chase then began and he went on a shooting rampage. He continued to film and tells his viewers that he's killed 2 other people who actually turned out to be an innocent man and his young son. He also wounded a police officer, another man and a woman while on the run. He ended up unaliving himself on the same day.
The murder of famous YouTuber and singer Christina Grimmie is one of the saddest and most shocking cases I've covered. It's the story of how one disturbed and obsessed individual took away everything she worked so hard to get. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into this case. This case hits very different for me because I really liked Christina Grimmie. It was really hard to go back and watch all those videos, so let's get into it. Christina Grimmie was born in New Jersey in 1994. She absolutely loved to sing from a very young age. In 2009, when she was only 15, she posted her very first cover onto YouTube.
Hi, I'm going to be singing I Don't Want to Be Torn by Hannah Montana,
under the username ZeldaxLove64. Little did she know that YouTube channel would absolutely change her life. Her first video that really went kind of viral was her cover of Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus. This was also in 2009, so her first year on YouTube. Christina was extremely talented, and the thing people really loved about her was how she added her own twist onto every cover that she did. She always managed to make her covers really unique. She slowly started getting more and more recognition, and in 2011 she started singing backup for Selena Gomez. She would even end up touring with Selena. June of 2011, she released an EP called Find Me, and it hit number 35 on the US Billboard 200. She was eventually on Ellen, her songs were being released on Radio Disney. Selena Gomez was her mentor. In 2012, she decided to move to LA to really focus on her career. At this point, her YouTube channel was growing super fast. She had grown to 2 million subscribers, 375 million views on her channel, and she was collaborating with a lot of other YouTubers and famous celebrities. The thing I really loved about Christina when I used to watch her was her energy. I always felt like you could tell she was a really kind person.
I just want to inspire people and be successful and make people happy, you know?
She really cared about everyone individually, which just makes everything in this case that much more heartbreaking. People loved Christina, and I think it was for the same reason that I did. She just seemed really genuine and caring. In 2014, she was on season 6 of The Voice. To this day, it's my favorite audition on any singing show ever. I'm not joking to you when I say I watched that audition a million times. I know it by heart. She performed Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball and blew everybody away, including me. All the judges obviously turned around for her. It was not an audition, it was more of an amazing performance. She ended up getting 3rd place on The Voice. I think she should have got 1st. I think she should have just won the moment she auditioned, to be honest. She was a star, and things just kept rising for her. She kept getting bigger and bigger. Throughout the years, she continued growing and releasing music. She released a lot of covers, and they were always just like chef's kiss amazing. Like, I won't lie to you, her version of Wrecking Ball on The Voice will forever, in my opinion, be better than Miley Cyrus's version. And I love Miley's voice and her songs, so that's saying a lot. Christina continued opening up and performing for bands and music groups, and that's exactly what she was going to do on the 10th of June 2016. She was performing with Before You Exit at the Plaza Live in Orlando. Before the show, she posted an announcement just saying like, "Hey guys, I'm performing here tonight, come and support me." And she performed amazingly, as usual. The performance ended at 10 p.m. that night, and then Christina went to do a meet and greet. She was outside the venue just signing some autographs, greeting fans. Christina absolutely adored her fans, and it was so clear. Like, she was so thankful for every single one of them, and she always greeted everyone with open arms and kindness. Everything would take a horrible turn at around 10:24 during that meet and greet. Christina was approached by a 27-year-old man. His name was Kevin, and at first he seemed like a really shy fan, so Christina went to give him a hug. She greeted him with open arms, and that's when he pulled out a pistol and shot Christina 3 times. Kevin immediately started running off, and Christina's brother was actually there, and so he tackled Kevin to the ground. Kevin briefly got away, but he then took the gun and took his own life with the gun. Christina fell to the ground in front of her brother, her fans, and she was bleeding quite severely from the head. Christina was pronounced dead at 11 p.m. at the hospital that same night. She was shot once in the head and twice in the chest, and her entire promising future was taken away in a second. Let's talk a bit about Kevin now and why he did what he did. According to the police, that night, Kevin traveled with 2 guns, 2 magazines full of ammo, and a very large hunting knife. There were no metal detectors at the venue where the concert happened. Kevin didn't have any record of mental illness that they knew of, but he apparently had a very unrealistic and unhealthy obsession with Christina Grimmie. He was completely infatuated with her. He even tried to change his appearance to be more attractive for her. He lost weight, he got his teeth whitened, he got a hair transplant, and so much more. It was an extremely intense fixation and obsession. It's believed that Kevin killed Christina with the motive of, if I can't have you, nobody will. In his mind, he possessed her by taking her life. And apparently right before that night, he told people that he was tired and ready to ascend. Christina's death was a horrific tragedy. It was heartbreaking for everybody who knew her, her family, her fans, the entire YouTube community. If you were like me and watched a lot of YouTube in 2016, it was very different to how it is now. It was very close-knit, and the entire online community mourned her. It was truly devastating. Selena even paid tribute to Christina at one of her concerts. Here's that video.
One thing about Christina and her family is that she holds her faith so closely to her. And I don't really understand how this really happened, but I would like to dedicate this next song to her.
I find it really hard to watch that video and not cry. A lot of lawsuits and changes came after Christina's death. Venues were made to be a lot more strict when it came to security, as they should be. There should have never not been a metal detector at that venue. Christina Grimmie's family created the Christina Grimmie Foundation. Its purpose was to help victims who have suffered from gun violence. I feel like this story is pretty unknown, so I just wanted to share her legacy and voice because it should be heard by everyone. It's also very strange for me because when this happened, I was only 16, but now I'm 23. She was 22 when she died. It feels really strange. She was only 22 years old. She was so successful. She would have made it so far. And it was all taken away in a matter of minutes because someone was infatuated with her, obsessed to an unhealthy level. And that is the tragic case of Christina Grimmie. If you take anything away from this video, go check out her voice audition. It's unbelievable. It's horrible to think that if the security had just been better, she would literally be here right now. She would have made it so far. That's all for today. If you enjoy true crime videos, I've got a whole playlist down here with like over 100 videos, so go crazy. I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.
I'm going to warn everybody right now, the case that we're about to cover is easily one of the most disturbing true crime stories I've ever heard in my life, so viewer discretion is really advised for this one. This is Kevin Davis. He was 18 years old back in 2014 when this horrific event took place. Kevin lived here in Corpus Christi, Texas, and shared an apartment with his mother, Kimberly, and his sister, Destiny. On May 26, 2014, Kevin snapped. He had been having homicidal thoughts for a long time, but on that particular day, he decided to bring his dreams and his fantasies into reality. On that morning, Kevin told his mother, Kimberly, that he wanted to unalive himself, and she told him that she couldn't stop him if he wanted to. After hearing this unexpected response from his mother, Kevin went into a rage. He grabbed a cord and attempted to strangle his mother on the couch where she was sitting. But his mom, Kimberly, managed to fight him off, and in a panic, Kevin went into the other room and grabbed a hammer. Now, this is where it gets really disturbing, so if you're still here with me and you have a weak stomach, don't keep listening. Kevin then bashed his own mother's skull in with the hammer, hitting her at least 20 times, and he then grabbed a knife from the kitchen and inserted the knife into the head wound. At that point, Kimberly's head was opened up, she had a massive head wound, and her brain was exposed. And Kevin stuck his hand into his own mother's head and played with her brains. He later told detectives that it felt like putty. Now, after his mother was dead, Kevin dragged her corpse into another room and her, which is unbelievably shocking and disgusting. After all this was said and done, he went to a neighbor's house, told them to call 911, told them that he had just murdered someone, and he was arrested without incident. When Kevin ultimately arrived at the police station, he was brutally honest with investigators about his crimes. I listened to the entire interrogation, and I cannot unhear some of the things that he told investigators. It's vile and shocking. But at one point, he smiles at the investigators with a little grin and says, "Yes, I guess I lost my to a corpse." After his trial, he was handed down a sentence of life in prison. He's still alive, he's still in Texas right now, and he even admitted to investigators that if he was given the chance, if he were out on the street again, he would kill again. I'm sorry to have to fill your guys' minds with this stuff, but this is a truly disturbing case that I can't stop thinking about because of how horrific it is, and yeah, I cannot believe that this happened.
Family of this missing girl found out via the media that she'd been murdered, butchered, and sold as kebab meat. This case will put you off ever eating a kebab again. Charlene Downs disappeared aged just 14 years old in November 2003. She was living in Blackpool, UK, and was last seen in an area containing many kebab shops and takeaways. While out with her friends one night, Charlene bumped into her mum. Her mum said that Charlene needed to be home by 10 PM that night, which was quite typical for Charlene. Tragically, this would be the last time that her mum would ever see Charlene alive. When Charlene didn't turn up by 10 PM, her dad went out on his bike looking for her for around half an hour. When he couldn't find her, he just presumed that she'd stayed over at her friend's house and went home and went to sleep. When she still didn't arrive the next morning, her parents started to get worried and they called police. Police, however, said that they could not report this as a missing person until she'd been missing for 48 hours. Eventually, police did start to look for her, but they said that they presumed she was a runaway. The case went cold until 3 years later. Charlene's family were called into a police station. There was news of 2 men who had been arrested, linked with a local takeaway called Funny Boys. They were arrested on suspicion of murder and disposal of Charlene. This is when the family found out some shocking news via the media about what had happened to Charlene. An article published stated that she had been grinded up and sold as kebab meat. One of the brothers of the men who had been arrested had heard them bragging about doing this. Now, Charlene's disappearance actually unearthed the fact that these takeaways were being used as a front for P rings, where men were luring teenagers in with food and alcohol in exchange for things I cannot repeat on this app. When the case against these 2 men went to trial, the jury failed to reach a verdict. The case was then thrown out of court due to apparent lack of physical evidence. One of the reasons for this is how well Charlene's body had obviously been disposed of. Both men who had been charged were given a £250,000 compensation for being falsely trialed. Around a week after the trial, Charlene's mum was actually arrested for stabbing her husband. He declined to press charges, saying that he knew she had been stressed. Members of the family were also charged with racially aggravated assault against the brother of the man who'd been charged with murder, and also punching the man who'd been charged with helping dispose of her body. In August 2017, police arrested a 51-year-old man who lived in Blackpool at the time of Charlene's disappearance. This was on suspicion of murdering her. However, he was released just 2 days later. We still have no justice for Charlene, and nobody is behind bars for her killing.